Editing is one of the crucial parts of the music creation process that's often overlooked. We want to jump in and get into the mixing and the mastering because that is where we get to make all of those cool mix decisions. But before we jump into mixing, it's a great idea to sit down and edit our track to make the mixing process even easier. So in this video, I'm going to show you some editing tips that I have here in GarageBand on the iPad or the iPhone. Let's go. Hi, my name is Pete. This is Studio Live Today, where I help you create, record and release your best music. And between the recording and the releasing, there's this little thing called editing that not a lot of folks have a lot of visibility of. And what I wanted to do in this video is just show you some of the tips that I have where you can clean up your tracks before you start your mixing, and it makes your mixing process so much better. So let's jump in now. I've got my track ready to go, and I'll show you a couple of these quick editing moves that are going to make your process more streamlined. And here we are, my friends, back in GarageBand here on my iPhone, where I'm continuing to work on this song. Now, this is a song that I've been working on for a few weeks now. I've done a few videos recently, one where I talked about a bad recording session I had that was on this song. I've since had a good recording session, and then in the last video, I actually comped these vocals, which means combining these 4 takes and putting them into one master vocal track. So if you want to check out that video, that will be linked up the top and down in the description as well. But today, we're talking about editing. So before we get to the mixing phase, what I like to do is actually edit these tracks so that there's no more editing that needs to be done. Now, what is editing all about, you might be asking? Well, the key things about editing is cleaning up your tracks. We're talking removing silences, we're talking fixing the timing of notes, and I'm going to show you the techniques that I use to edit my tracks here, and I'm going to give you 3 different tips that we're going to go through. Now, the first one is around cleaning up our audio. So I've done a pretty good job of this so far. If we come to the start here, I've actually already done most of this. So there's the start of my guitar tracks, and I've just got this little bit of lead in time here. So let's just take a listen and make sure that there's no sort of noise that's happening that's going to distract before our guitars kick in. No, that's pretty good. And what we might do is we may just automate up the volume just to fade in there so it's not going from just background noise to playing, but we're going to do that in our mixing phase. Let's grab our other guitar and check this one and make sure this is the same sort of deal. Yep, no problems there. And let's go all the way to the end and make sure that our last note is going to have the same deal here, that we're not going to get a bunch of noise. What we're looking for is noise before or after any of our tracks. So we'll play back the end of this track. Okay, we have a timing issue there, but we'll get back to that. We will fix that. I'll show you how we can fix the timing of those notes a little bit later. There you go. That's a little tease of what we'll be going to later in the video. So that is our guitar tracks. We'll now come down to our vocal tracks and our vocal master here. Now, I've already, when I did the comping, I've already brought my vocals down. So when they start here, they don't have a lot of pre-noise. They sound like this. I crossed the road and never even... So that's all good. In fact, let's just unsolo these guitars, because what I've actually done, just to show you what I'm talking about here, if I just drag this out, let's take a listen. This might be a bit embarrassing, but let's take a listen to what my vocals were sounding like before I actually started, because this is me just sitting listening to the guitars, waiting to sing. So let's take a listen. It's me breathing. Yay! Who would have thought you'd be watching a video of a guy breathing on a track? But yeah, we don't want that, right? You don't need to hear me breathing, waiting to sing before I listen to a track. So that's why we need to clean these up and then do the same at the end. So I happen to know, because I've been through and done them, that I've cleaned up these tracks front and back so we don't have any lead in or lead out sound that is going to be annoying. It just means that when we're mixing, we just don't have to worry about it. All we need to worry about is volume and volume automation and our effects and EQ. We don't need to worry about this. So that is our number 1 tip, is get rid of that background noise before and after your tracks. Okay, so let's move on to editing tip number 2, and it is going to involve our vocal track here. So as I mentioned in the last video, we comped together these 1, 2, 3, 4 vocal tracks into this one master track, which means it has all these little segments. And now there's nothing inherently wrong about these segments, but if, like me, you're scrolling around and sometimes you accidentally grab a handle and do something like that, and then don't realize it, and then you're too late to undo it, well then, yeah, this tip might work well for you too. So let's undo that before we cause some serious damage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use our old friend merge and normalize to merge this vocal track into one nice clean audio track. So To do that, I follow this process just to make sure I get a nice clean audio track conversion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap and hold and just drag this to the bottom just for convenience sake, so that when we add our new track, it's going to be right next door. And then down at the bottom here, we can tap on the plus button, we can hit more sounds, and then under fun, we're going to tap clean, because clean audio is under fun because Apple. And then when we go back to our track view, we can see now that we have this clean audio track underneath. Now what I need to do now is actually drag this track, so I'm going to highlight it, and then I'm going to very carefully, I'm going to zoom in on this one, because we need to make sure that I drag this to the exact same spot on this track. So I'm just going to tap and drag straight down. It will give you that little line there, but if you're not zoomed in, it can be easy to move it around a little bit too much. So that is lined up. So now I've shifted my audio from this track here, which has all my processing, my compression, my effects on it, to a clean audio track. And this is the one I'm going to merge, so that when I then bring it back to this track, it's not going to have double processing, because if I merge from this one and then put it back on the track, it's merging the process track, and then if I add more compression and delay and reverb, it's going to be double processed. So we don't want that. We want it to be just a clean audio track. So let's now tap on this one. We're going to go merge. What it's going to do is it's going to say, yes, this one track we're going to merge. We're going to tap merge in the top right corner, and then it duplicates the track just for a backup. It goes away, it merges, it normalizes, and there you go. We now have that merge track there. So what it's done is it's put it all into one nice, neat track, so I can no longer do anything wrong and move this around, because it's covering the whole of all of the sections, and it's increased the volume. It's normalized that volume up, which is two very handy things to have here when we're editing. And now the last step in the process is to simply tap and drag this back up. We no longer need this track here, so we can tap and delete our clean audio track. And here we go, we have our vocal back. We'll slide it back into its place, just up here above these other vocals. I will delete these other vocals, by the way. I don't need these ones in here, but they're just still in there from my comping session that I just completed. But now I'll turn the volume down a bit, because it's going to be louder, as you can see by the waveforms. Let's take a listen now. We'll take that off solo, and let's take a listen to the new vocals that we've now merged and normalized and put back onto this track.
I crossed the road and never even look one way. I always seem to know the perfect thing to say.
And there you go, and now we don't have to be like really pushing the envelope here all the way up with our volume. We can keep it at a more reasonable level because we've done that normalizing. And I could come in and do that for these guitars if I wanted to as well. I'm probably not going to bother. There's only a couple of sections in each of these, so you don't want to just go nuts with this stuff. But that particular vocal track, I wanted to make sure, because I spend a lot of time on volume automation and other things when I'm mixing, as you'll find out in the next video that I put out about mixing, then I want to make sure that I've got a track like this to make it easier for myself when I get to the mixing and the automation phase. So there you go, that is our second editing tip here in GarageBand. Okay, now I hope you're ready for editing tip number 3, because I've saved what I believe is the best for last. It's also the most advanced feature, and it's also the one that can get you in the most trouble if you don't do it right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of advice here. Now, I have done a video about this before where I've showed how to fix the timing of notes. It can be a tricky thing to do, but if done correctly, and with the right sort of instrument and the right sort of notes, you get a good sound. You're not going to go and change the timing of one note in the middle of an intricate guitar solo with a heap of sustain, because it's just going to sound completely wrong and disjointed, and it won't be good. But what I've actually got here is I've got a small problem with this last little chord that I have on these 3 guitars, and that is that they are not in sync. Let's play these back and take a listen and see what the problem is.
I'm never to blame.
So you can hear there that that's supposed to be a big final brump, and what is it? It's there, and then it's there. So they are not aligned, and they don't have to be perfect. You probably don't want perfect, but I think I can improve on that. I think that we can move these a little bit to make that final chord, or those 3 guitars playing that final chord, sound a lot better. So we're just going to use some pretty basic splitting here, but there's a few techniques that I need to explain as we go along. Now, I've talked about the snap to grid feature before, so you'll notice that when you move around in GarageBand, it's going to snap to the grid, which is going to be a nice way to sort of keep things aligned. But sometimes when you're doing things like this, you don't want alignment. So if you zoom in all the way, what you'll notice under my playhead there is that snap to grid off has come on, which means that we can now move at any location. Now, here on the iPhone, it's going to be a little bit tricky, a little bit finicky to do this, but we're still going to be okay. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so what I do is I split here, and then I split here, and then I move those down. Well, I'm going to recommend against that. What I like to do, because this is all vacant area, yeah? So if you split really close, you can cut off the start of that chord. Now, we're going to create some blank space somewhere, because of the nature of what we're going to do here. So I would rather create the blank space down here where it's supposed to be blank than maybe just before the chord. You'll get what I mean as we go through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some splits. I'm going to split there. I'm going to come to my next track. I'm going to go split, and I'm going to split there. So what I've got now, and you're probably ahead of me, is I've got these two pieces of audio that I can now move. So what I'll do is I'll bring my playhead and I'll pop it. I've got to zoom all the way back in again to turn my snap to grid off. I'll put my playhead right here on the very start of this late one. And now I'm going to grab this piece of audio and drag it right to the spot where it's going to be. I'm going to grab this one, and then I'm going to tap and hold and drag that one right to the spot that it's going to be. And now let's listen to the finale of this song now that we have fixed the timing of these notes.
I'm never to blame.
How about that? There you go. And you don't even notice that it goes completely silent for a couple of milliseconds there because the guitar's not playing. Now, if it was a constant chord through there, then yeah, you're going to have a few more problems being able to do that. So you do have to pick your spots for fixing the timing. But where you have a big gap like that, and it would be the same for this vocal, where you've got big gaps where nothing's happening, that to me is an invitation to do some editing and to fix some timing of some notes. So that one is super powerful because nothing just reeks amateur like notes that are just slightly out of time. Like, it doesn't have to be perfection, but you know when you're just listening to something, you're like, the timing is just off and it's distracting. Well, that's what I was finding with that last little chord there. Now it's nice and synced up and in time, but still sounding natural. So I think that's a pretty cool little editing tip, and hopefully you can use that and the other tips that we've had here in your next project to improve your editing and get ready for the next phase for your mixing of your next track. And there you go, hopefully a few little tips there that are going to help you when you hit the editing stage of your song creation here in GarageBand iOS. If you've got any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can leave those down in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next video. Hey, thanks for sticking around. If you'd like to check out some more videos here on the channel, there are two linked right down below. You can also subscribe to the channel by clicking on the Studio Live Today icon up in the top right corner, or you can head on over to studiolivetoday.com for more audio goodness.